Welcome, Shadow Seekers, to American Shadows, Crimes, and Chronicles. Today, we're unearthing a tale that'll haunt your thoughts long after it ends. Whether you're glued to the screen or just listening in, you're in for a wild ride through history's darkest corners. If you're new, hit subscribe to join our mission of exposing America's hidden truths. Regulars, your likes fuel our journey into the unknown. Now, let's peel back the layers of time and reveal the secrets beneath. Ready? Let's begin. 101 lives lost in 7 seconds. America's deadliest train crash exposed. Gather round, folks, because I've got a tale for you that'll make your blood run cold. It's a story of steel and steam, of human error and tragic consequences. We're talking about July 9th, 1918, the day Nashville, Tennessee became the site of one of the deadliest train wrecks in American history. Picture this. It's the height of World War I, and America is in full wartime mode. The railways are the lifeblood of the nation, moving troops, supplies, and civilians across the country at a feverish pace. Nashville is alive with the hum of industry and the clatter of rail cars, a vital hub in the national rail network. On this fateful morning, 2 trains are barreling towards each other on a single track, and neither engineer knows the other is coming. One train, the number 4 from Memphis to Nashville, is running behind schedule. The other, number 1, the local express from Nashville to Memphis, is just getting underway. These trains, filled with passengers ranging from business travelers to families and soldiers on leave, are about to meet in a way that no one aboard could have imagined. The Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis Railway operated a single track system between 2 busy points near Nashville, Harding and Shops Junction. To manage this, the railway relied heavily on precise communication and coordination between dispatchers and train crews. However, on this day, a perfect storm of miscommunications and errors would set the stage for disaster. At around 7 a.m., the dispatcher at the Nashville station, pressured by the delays and the tight schedule, issued orders that would ultimately lead to catastrophe. The number 4 train was given clearance to proceed to Shops Junction, assuming that number 1 had already cleared the track. Meanwhile, the engineer and conductor of number 1 were unaware of the approaching danger and proceeded at full speed towards Harding. As the trains rounded a blind curve near Dutchman's Curve, just west of Nashville, the engineers suddenly saw each other. Imagine the horror of that moment. 2 massive steel beasts, each weighing hundreds of tons, bearing down on each other at full speed. Both engineers threw their engines into reverse and blew their whistles. But it was too late. The trains collided with a force that witnesses described as like a massive explosion. The sound of twisting metal and shattering glass could be heard for miles. The wooden cars of train number 4 were no match for the force of the collision. They telescoped into each other, crushing passengers between splintered wood and twisted steel. The locomotive of train number 1 plowed through several cars before coming to rest atop the wreckage. The scene that greeted the first responders was one of unimaginable horror. Bodies were strewn across the tracks, some mutilated beyond recognition. The cries of the injured mixed with the hiss of escaping steam and the crackle of small fires that had broken out in the wreckage. Panic ensued as survivors, dazed and injured, struggled to comprehend what had just happened. Rescue efforts began almost immediately, with local residents, railroad workers, and emergency services rushing to the scene. The sight that greeted them was one of utter devastation. Bodies strewn across the tracks, injured passengers crying for help, and the wreckage smoldering in the summer heat. In the end, 101 people lost their lives that day, and another 171 were injured. It was a staggering toll, made all the more tragic by the fact that many of the victims were young workers, soldiers, and entire families, the lifeblood of America's war effort. But here's where our story takes another turn. As rescue efforts were underway, questions began to swirl. How could such a catastrophe have happened? Who was to blame? The initial investigation focused on the crew of train number 1. Why hadn't they waited at the siding as they were supposed to? The conductor and engineer both claimed they had never received orders to wait, but others argued that even without explicit orders, they should have known to wait for the passing train based on the standard schedule. Then there were questions about the railway company itself. Had they cut corners on safety to keep the trains running during wartime? Were the communication systems adequate? Some pointed to the fact that the track was single instead of double as a contributing factor to the accident. The aftermath of the crash led to an intense investigation by the Interstate Commerce Commission, ICC. The findings were a scathing indictment of the railroad's practices. The report cited poor communication, human error, and inadequate safety measures as primary causes. It highlighted the dispatcher's failure to properly manage the train schedules and the lack of advanced signaling systems that could have prevented the collision. But there was another, darker theory that began to circulate. Some whispered that the crash wasn't an accident at all, but an act of sabotage. Remember, this was during World War I, and fears of German spies and saboteurs were rampant. Could enemy agents have somehow caused the crash to disrupt the transport of war materials? While no evidence of sabotage was ever found, the theory persisted for years, adding another layer of intrigue to the already tragic event. The tragedy at Dutchman's Curve sparked significant changes in railroad safety regulations. The ICC's recommendations led to the widespread adoption of automatic block signals and other technologies designed to prevent such accidents. It was a painful lesson, but one that ultimately improved safety standards across the country. But perhaps the most lasting impact of the Dutchman's Curve train wreck was on the collective psyche of Nashville and the nation. It was a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked in the technologies that were rapidly reshaping American life. The railway, once seen as a symbol of progress and connection, now also carried with it the specter of potential disaster. For years after the crash, locals spoke in hushed tones about the tragedy. Some claimed to hear the ghostly sound of a train whistle near the site on quiet nights. The wreck became a part of Nashville folklore, a cautionary tale passed down through generations. Today, a small memorial stands near the site of the crash, a quiet reminder of the lives lost on that July morning. But the legacy of the Dutchman's Curve train wreck lives on in more than just memory. It lives on in the safety features of modern railways, in the protocols followed by train crews, and in the ongoing efforts to balance efficiency with safety in our transportation systems. As we reflect on this tragic event, we're reminded of the human cost of progress, the fine line between routine and disaster, and the importance of learning from our past mistakes. The Dutchman's Curve train wreck stands as a somber chapter in American history, a moment when the promise of technology collided head-on with its perils. So, the next time you hear the distant whistle of a train, spare a thought for those who lost their lives that day in Nashville. Their story is a reminder that behind every technological advancement, every step of progress, there are human lives at stake. It's a lesson we'd do well to remember, even in our modern age of seeming invincibility. This is American Shadows, folks, where we dive into the dark corners of history and try to shed some light on the events that shaped our world. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your wits about you, because you never know when history might come barreling around the bend.